Well, Aleph, this is actually a very relevant daf to many halachas, which is just interesting again how things evolve. Okay, so this whole parak so far is talking about when the husband tries to cancel the get, and so on. Then we're talking about different tikkun oil, different takanas that were made, especially Rabbi Gamliel Hazak in himself made. It's Hill's grandson. So the last little bit was about Almana, if she can collect her ksuba without having to swear. And now in the Mishnah it says that witnesses signing on a get is a takana. Says the Gemara, "Ve'edim chayfin on get in the tikkun olam." As the Mishnah says, "Tikkun olam." The Raisus in the Torah. The Fruit says, actually very interesting. We're going to quote now a pasuk in Tanakh, and Tanakh is known as Divrei Kabbalah. And there's a big argument in Halach if words of Nevi'im have the status of the Torah or status of the Rabbanon. Big machlekes. We had in Gemara Megillah there between Almor, the Rambam, and others regarding. Megillah, Tveria, they didn't know what the status is, and yet right here the Gemara calls it deraisa, even though quoting a passing in Yom Chsiv. It says over there that it was told to buy property before they were expelled, evicted, and went to Babel for the destruction based on English. They could come back in the Chsiv, and the pasuk says the chosay b'seif. You should write the sefer the chosay, and you should get it signed and sealed. So we see this Torah. Actually, we did discuss a while ago that according to the Rambam, all contracts are midrabanan because it says in mipihem the line mipiksavam. You should have it verbal and not from their writing. And every contract is a written contract. The Ramban argues about Gittin and all that. And we talk about Reb Chaim, who makes a difference between Gittin and one of the proofs that the Ramban brings against the Rambam is this Gemara right here. The Gemara says that having Adam sign on a contract is mahatayra. According to the Rambam, no contract is mahatayra. All contracts with the Rabbanon, because that PM you have to write for the mouth. Omar says Rabbi, we're talking about it goes to Rabbi Lazar. Learned before. Rabbi Lazar says the primary Adam are the Adam Masir, the witness of transfer, and the only reason why we have the Omar Adam Masir Kasit, the Kinyan Rabbanon, we have a special incident, a special rule. Ada Chasima, we should have witnesses signing as well. And what's the tikkun olam? The zimun in the Ma'aseh side. Sometimes the witnesses, agents here will die. Inam zimun doesn't go overseas, and then either according to some Rishonim, the husband can come and challenge the authenticity of the get, or people are going to ask her, "How do we know that we're divorced? Because you got a piece of paper with signatures. How do we know anything?" So therefore, So how do you know? Because you told us that you have Adam Masira. How do we know that ever happened? But if you have a star with Adam, and we're going to assume that the Adam would not have signed if they themselves were not aware that there was a proper get given from the husband to the wife. And Rabbi Yosef says, I feel Meir, even according to Meir. So according to Meir, he holds the vital of the Adam. It's not just a takana. He's Adam and saying getting the tikkun oil. What the kana was that they write their names. Interesting. In those days, they didn't write their name. They just wrote "I am an aid," those words, and then the bezin had to find some other sample, a facsimile of that signature, and authenticate it. It was only years later they said, "Well, you didn't have last names," and years later they said, "Okay, you write Reuben ben Yosef." And there were a number of Reuben Yosef in the city, right? 3 generations, and so on. That was a takanos oil, and made life so much easier. Because now we know exactly who they are, and we can call them in, or people who know them say, "Are you familiar with this signature?" Just these words, I, without saying I Pliny, without saying the name, sign the name. They were able to compare to some other signature, possibly. But now they made this special takana. Amar Rab Gamliel, takana gedoli is made a big takana. She mefoshin shem was saying begitin the tikkun olam that they would write their names down. You have to write the name down even later on, but you couldn't just have a signature. Sometimes you look at people's signatures; it's first unrecognizable, and you don't even see the connection to the original name. Guy signs 3 X's or something. Well, Rav used to make a picture of a fish. That was his signature. And Rabbi Chanina, what he would do was he would make a picture of a branch of a palm tree. Rav Chizda, he made a samach. And Rabbi Hoshia with an ayin, he made an ayin. Rabbi Ravuna Tzayim Makusa, he would make the thing like a mast of a ship. So it was a Shai Rabban became Simnayu. Everyone's familiar with those pictures in right away who it was. But in the beginning, when they started using this signature, how did they know who it was? Bidiski. They used to write many letters, and like Rashi says, they used to write Sha'as and Shuvas in those days. Sha'as and Shuvas now no idea response. The people would ask questions and they would answer. They would put it in writing, and or stamp letters of greetings, and then they would sign their names. So you give familiar that a fish. a fish was a zrab, and so on. Says the Gemara, there's a big machlekes Rishonim. In fact, there's a read right here on the spot as well. We had in face of Dal and Al. So according to Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Lazar, Eidich Simon don't count at all, only Eid and Mesida. So the Taser really being two opinions. One opinion is when he says Eid and Mesida, he means only Eid and Mesida, Mahat Torah. Eidich Simon is purely Tikkun Olam. According to some other Rishonim, according to Rabbi Lazar, you have a choice. You can either use Eidich Simon or Eid and Mesida. And that's how it, and then the takana was you should always have Eidich Simon, not ever rely solely on Eid and Mesida. Okay, according according to those Rishonim, and then he really discounts it. Then we had taste of Dal and we had that even according to Rabbi Meir, it says Eidich Simon. So when it comes to get, he also agrees you need Eid and Mesida. Why is that? The Eidich Simon activate the get. How do you know the get was given to her? A get is just two parts to it. There's the actual document, and then you have to see that she received the get. And therefore, those opinions say that according to Rameh, you still need two witnesses in Syria because they ain't Dovish Red Parker 9. Others say you don't, because since we know the way Asian was signed to get, and then they find it in her hand, how did it get into her hand? Obviously, the husband gave it to her. We're not going to say, oh, maybe it fell from his hand in the white thumb. We don't say that. First, the husband would have said something, and it's not something that we're choishish on our own. Says the Gemara further. The next takana was pruzbul. Hillel hiskim pruzbul. Hillel initiated the pruzbul. Now, this pruzbul, which is basically to circumvent the problem in the Torah, unfortunately, over the years, a lot of movements in Yiddishkeit to try to water down Yiddishkeit, they use this as their basis. So you see, when you can't do, when mitzvah the Torah, let's say, it's difficult, you lose alone, we're going to go ahead and find ways to make it mutter. But obviously, two things. First of all, as we're seeing more here, this head is completely within the framework of the Torah. The Chum have the right to do these things. And second of all, is to remove an Issa Deraisa that was happening at that time, very prevalent. And therefore, there was a takana, as we'll see. And it's only money matters that what they did here. And money is unique because Hefker, Bezin Hefker, Chum have the right to take your money away from you as it is. So you want to know how we learn Pruzbul. What's a Pruzbul? Pruzbul ain't a misham. It comes to your Shemitah, automatically all the loans become null and void. And a Pruzbul does not become null and void because you give it over to the Bezin, and no longer you don't owe me the money. I'm not approaching you. It's a Bezin. The Echad min Advarim Shishkin Hillel Zaken is one of the things that Hillel Zaken instituted. Shira, and why did he do it? Shira, you saw as he saw people were over and is in the Torah, and they stopped lending money, especially the 6th year, because they were scared they'll get paid back, they'll get reimbursed. But Avru, and they were over because of the Torah, they were over the Torah says Yishamlacha. When it comes to Shemitah, you should be careful and avoid you'll have these ill thoughts in your mind not to lend money. Ahmad, he went ahead, he decided to make a pruzbul. This is the essence of the pruzbul. What the word pruzbul itself means, we'll see more later. I'm giving over to you, Pliny, Dayanin, these Dayanin, Shemaka Pliny, this area, Kol Chayv, Sheyeshli, Eitza Pliny, any chayv that I have, She'egbenu, that I can collect, Kozman She'ertze, whenever I so desire. And now, according to Rashi over here, he says, Mosran Lechem, Rashi says, I'll give you all my documents. So first of all, you have to give all the documents, or just tell them I'm giving you all my documents. But apart from that, what about loans which have no documents? Undocumented loans, oral loans, a milvan pet. It seems clearly from Rashi, and a number of Shayim will hold that you cannot make a pruzbul for a milvan pet. A pruzbul is only for milvan bishtar because there's karka involved, there's property involved, and agav the property you're also giving over to the to the bezin the star plus. You have shibuda deraisa, which means the property already belongs to the lender. If there's property involved, the property already belongs to the lender, so therefore he's what do you call it? It's not like he's collecting money on Shemitah. In fact, they want to say if you hold shibuda lav deraisa, the whole idea of pruzbul doesn't fall into place. As we'll see in a minute, it could very well be that this whole idea of pruzbul only follows one opinion. What do we mean? As we'll see. Sign or your edim other witnesses. Me ika midi Is there anything the Midraisa? Want to ask a question? The Torah says, "Misham, you don't owe the money." Shvi. So while it comes Shemitah, there's no loan. He's can heal. Let me find what he'll went and made the con against the Torah and said, "What? You still owe the money?" Amar Abaye says, "B'shviyas b'zman hazev." That this will only work in B'shvi Shemitah, today's times, and Hillel is and Hillel is following the view of his great grandson Rebbe that holds that Shemitah b'zman hazev midrabban. Now Hillel lived in the second base of Mikdash. So, which means that when he says Manazeh, it means the second base of Mirshim. And Rashi brings here a big machlekes between Yerushalmi, interesting, and the Teres Kainim, as to whether during the second base of Mikdash, Shemitah was from the Torah or not. In other words, do we say we're having ending more that only when Yovel is there is Yovel do we have Shemitah? When there's no Yovel, there's no Shemitah. And when is the Yovel? This man Yisrael Yoshem when all the Eden are living in Israel, and the second base of Mikdash, the Aseret Shvatim, were gone. And because the Aseret Shvatim were gone, not all the Jews lived in Israel, mainly primarily Yehuda and Binyamin, and therefore because of Yehuda and Binyamin, there was no Yovel in the second base of Mikdash. So Shemitah them is only midrabban. That's one version. That's how Rashi favors. And the other one was that no, that and in fact, it's Rabbeinu Tam and Tosfos here hold that Shemitah in the second base of Mikdash definitely was Mahaterah. And when Rabbi said this Manazeh, he means post base Hamikdash. Hillel, who lived 100 years before the base Hamikdash was destroyed, that's the very last line here on this page, right? Went over the sources, that Hillel lived 100 years before the base Hamikdash was destroyed. When he says Manazeh, when he made Prudel, he was talking about post base Hamikdash, which opened the whole Pandora's box and the shame want to know it. Hillel made. And they find, it's one thing Hillel knew the core base of Mikdash. You're telling me that Hillel already, while the base of Mikdash was standing, was making takanas how life would be post base core base of Mikdash. They find it unacceptable. It's one thing Rabbi Bezaka made all of these takanas after the base of Mikdash was destroyed, how we should continue. But while the base of Mikdash was standing to make takanas how life is going to be without a base of Mikdash, they find that completely, just unacceptable. And therefore they argue. But another interesting point is whether those who are say that the Shvatim came back. We follow the opinion that they came back. Yeshua brought them back. When they all came back to Eretz Yisrael, so all were there already. And that itself is an argument. Even within that opinion, they all came back, or they came back. They went away from where they were to put them, but they never really made it back to Israel. And or did they go back to the original places? It was only a sprinkle of each Shevet that came back. We know each Shevet came back as Ezra. It says clearly that there was members from each Shevet there. But was it like the bulk? Was it a token? Sort of I guess symbol or something. Just a little. A small element of each tribe that came back. But anyway, let's continue. So since Shemitah today is only midrabbanan, and this is Rebbe. It says, how does Rebbe know that? It says the pasuk says, Shemitah Shamai. This is the idea. Shemitah Shamai that it should cancel. You have two Shemitahs. Shemitah Shamai. The Shemitah goes out. Two kinds of Shemitah. Acha Shemitah is karka. There's one called Shemitah of the karka, and the Acha Shemitah is ksafim, and one is money. There's manchat the mishamet karka. When you cancel karka, the mishamet ksafim. That's when there's also Shemitah money gets canceled. There's manchat yet mishamet karka. When there's no karka, there is no ksafim either. So therefore, since the second base of Mikdash, there's no karka, there's no money. The money doesn't count either. and Tosfos wants to make a big distinction even in karka when we say that there's no yovel. There's two parts. There's the law that the land goes back to where it came from, and there's a law that you're not allowed to plow the land, you're not allowed to this. When we say that there's no yovel, maybe we don't need to allow to plow all that, but the karka part, returning the land, 50 years, go back to its owner, and then redivide, whatever it is, that did happen, even during the second base of Mikdash. Anyway, but the Rabbanan who argue with Rebbe, who hold Shemitah midaraisa, at least in the man base of Mikdash, that means according to Rashi learns, they can't have prudel. According to Abaye, the only reason why prudel took off is because you hold Shemitah Rabbanan. It means according to Rabbanan, there's no Shemitah Rabbanan in the base of Mikdash. Then it's Mahatayda. There's no prudel at all, and they would argue. So they went further. When Rothschild bought all these farms, particularly place in the 1880s, all these questions started coming up. What about Shemitah? Is it Mahatayda today? Is it the Rabbanon, the laws of Trumas, the laws of Mises? And all these issues became, Avinese got involved heavily. All these issues became serious issues when it became real. Because till then it was all theoretical. How strict should it be? And then the concept of Bisman Shirov Yisrael Yeshua, or more said Kohen Yisrael. What happens when the majority of the population starts living in Israel, which according to official statistics is pretty nigh Rome is there? What do the laws change then? Everything become out tighter, which will make it so much more difficult. All these hatayim they have here right now, they're working because of the Rabbanan, but it's not tighter. What happens then? So there's a lot of issues to be discussed. When Mashiach will come, he'll resolve them all. Then what the Tikkun Rabbanan to Shamit, Zeichel Shvit. The Chachamim came along and said, you know what? Even though there's no Shmita anymore today, but with the Rabbanan we're going to make Shmita, so we should remember Shmita. Because all Shmita is Rabbanan, that the longest council, the Rabbanan have the right to say, make a proof. They saw that people were not lending each other, which is in the Torah. He made proof. Says the mother, you tell me the whole idea of Shmita doesn't exist. Right, so therefore the loan is there. The kid come along the Rabbanan and say. So the problem here is get frugal. The problem, what do you mean? The Torah says this guy, owes A owes B money, and then comes along the Rabbanan and say, no, come to your Shemitah, you don't owe the money. No, how can that be? The Rabbanan have a religion where you have tzaddik, but you have a Shayfer and Shabbat, you have like this coming the Roshana and Sukkot. Why? Because the Rabbanan have a right to say, be passively, don't do what the Torah wants. Tell me here, don't pay the money. Rabba gives a different answer. Rabba says, even according to everybody. He's not. He's saying according to everybody, even according to Chachamim, even Yod Shmita is not Torah. So what? Hefke, Bez and Hefke, the Rabbanan have the right to say, and he's answering both questions. If you hold Shmita as the Rabbanan have the right to say that even though you owe the money from the Torah, no Shmita anymore. We say you don't owe the money, or they have the right to say that even though you owe the money, not Torah, even Shmita holds not Torah today. The Rabbanan going to say, don't pay the money. Or pay the money, even though it says you don't owe the money, because Hefke, Bez, and Hefke. When it comes to money matters, it's unique. You don't have the right to have that power. I know Hefke works. Menai Hefke, Bez, and Hefke. I know Hefke, Bez, and Hefke. Remember it says the Cholash of the baby Gimi, Ezra said, so the Eden were in Israel when they came back, were married out, and he warned them that they had to come forward, and and so on and so forth. And he gave them a warning. He said the following: the Cholash of the Yamin, anybody does not come back within 3 days. Katzas and Sodi was came the advice of the officers there at the elders is Yechel Kol Chusha. His entire estate will be taken away from him. And he will be separated from the Jews that just came back from Babel. So we see from here what we'll take your assets away. Hefker, that's the source. Rabelezer pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says, the following, when they subdivided Israel amongst all the tribes, and you have over there, you have a Elazar Kohen, you have Yeshua ben Nun, and you have the head of each family for their tribe. What in the world do the heads of the tribes have to do with the parents? You just said V'Roshi Hamatas. What do you mean V'Roshi Ha'avos? What's Roshi Ha'avos? Says the Gemara. Says Roshi Ha'avos leMatzah b'nei Yisrael. Let's say Roshi Ha'matzah, the head of the tribes. Where does Avos come in? Lo Mechat teach you. Ma Avos Mamchilin is b'nei Kol Mashi Yitzu. A father has the right to decide to distribute his estate how he wants. Which child wants to give himself forward? So to these Roshim were able to inherit to the kids whatever they wanted. We hadn't go have more evolution. I was done. They choose a better property, more property. So we see clearly that Hefke and Hefke, the leaders have the right. They all have the right to decide how to distribute the money. The Rashba says a beautiful thing. You don't normally find this in Shine for Nachrani, but Rashba says the two psukim are actually arguing with each other. It says Rabbi Lezer Omar, there's an argument. What are they arguing about? How far do we take Hefke and Hefke? And also, what's the Rashba asked when Foshim asked, bring first a pasuk in Tanakh, and then you bring a pasuk in the Torah. And you have a pasuk in the Torah. Why doesn't the other guy? What's the point of bringing a pasuk in Tanakh from Ezra when you have a pasuk in the Torah? Because it's not the same thing. Hefke doesn't have to mean they have the right to say that the money is no longer yours. But do they have the capacity also to take that money and give it to somebody else, or the money is no longer yours and now somebody else has to come make a kin from Hefke? The pasuk from Yirmiyah, all it tells us is Yechem Kol Chushay. You forfeit your ownership. It's no longer yours. That's all. The pasuk in the Torah is manchil. Not only do they take the property of Yisrael, but they give it over to you. And that's the machlekes. How far do we take Hefke, Bez, and Hefke? And the pasuk in Ezra, therefore, is clear what it does. And the first opinion says he doesn't learn the pasuk like he doesn't learn like Rabbi Lezer because that's taking it too far. How do Chacham have the koyach to do 2 steps, take it away from you and give it to somebody else? And that's the machlekes there. Says Gemara, so now we have a question. He's can heal Prusbul when Hill made the Prusbul was talking was only for his generation. Or for future generations as well. So according to Rashi, it's very simple. His generation for Rashi, all kingdom is man based in English, Shemitah was the Rabbanon. And the question is that also what about later generations? When people, for example, as we'll see tomorrow, aren't so mean spirited and they'll lend money even the 6 years. You still have to have this as crucible thing. And according to Taisus, is it only the couple of generations right after Churban Beis Hamikdash, or is it also for future generations onwards? And that, unfortunately, we're gonna have a hard time. What Hillel knew that this mean-spirited, spirit is only applicable the first 2 generations after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and the future generations all get better. How does he know that? But I mean, each generation will worry about it when the time comes. What does it even mean, according to the Rabbi Tam? But anyway, what's the difference? The difference is a little bit too late. If you want to cancel Hillel's Prusbul, talking only for his generation, then you can cancel it. Very important rule we had in Marbella, that you cannot cancel or override a previous Bezdin's institutions unless you are larger in number and in stature, in quality and in quantity. And unfortunately, if it's a Bezdin, and that Bezdin Sanhedrin would say 71 or 23, whatever it is, how can you have larger numbers? Sanhedrin is Sanhedrin. Some say all the rabbis around, students. Are we talking about, when I say quality, we're talking about just the head of the Sanhedrin or the tie Sanhedrin? Now, this is very negay, for example. So, what you see clearly in here is the way Pashta Pshat is, and many have learned this way, and that is, if they made a takana, and this is the reason no longer applies, it doesn't automatically fade away. You still have to be mevatlin. You still have to mevatl it. And then the question is, do you still need a godel menachachmin or not? Where the reason is still applicable, then you cannot be mevatl unless godel menachachmin. But if the reason is no longer applicable, it remains in place, and it doesn't automatically fade away. Like the Rambam says, there's no pigs, nobody milks, he says, from pigs in our city, everything else, but it doesn't matter. Because once the put it into place, what are you worried about? Nobody mixes the milk from pigs or camels. Once the Chacham is put in place, it remains in place. And where it really comes into effect as well is Chayra Ben Geshem. According to those who are showing the hold, that was only till the 5th millennium. Because the Machlekes was it for or ever more not. If it's only 5th millennium, what happens now? Is it still applicable or not? If you learn the way we just learned, Kol's man, we didn't override it, even though the let's say the reason doesn't apply or does apply. Kol's man, we didn't override it. It's not a problem. So even if you live in a country where polygamy is permitted, the Bechei Regesh is still in place because nobody stood there formally and canceled it. And
how do you extend it then? Is it the same?
It's automatic.
So
it's automatic. There's a point. You have. It says the mavat. You have to, even the reason to apply. Still, you have to go out there and cancel it. Kol man wasn't canceled, it's not canceled. So all the he did many harams, but that you cannot forcibly get to a wife or that, all that kind of stuff. So I still need to head to May Rabbanim and all that. Telling about further, Toshma coming in. Shmuel said, like Kasvina Prusbul, we don't write a Prusbul. Ella Ibe Beidin the Surah only if you have a top-notch bezin, which is either the bezin of Surah where Rav was, or the Beidin Adoi where Shmuel was. So you have to have a top-notch bezin. But then, and now the question is for Isaac, and if Hillel made it forevermore, Bishar Beidin Naminit, then why only those two select bezin? Any bezin. He made a takana forevermore. He talking Hillel Dor Alma. What he meant was, of course, it's forevermore. What he meant was he going Beidin today. He meant he didn't mean only his bezin. He meant a bezin like his that had authority. They have the authority to extract money, so therefore they have the authority to make a proposal. Like Rava said, it's to do with hefke bezin hefke. So it's the bezin that has authority. But other just bezin, no, that's what Shmuel was saying. So nothing to do with our question. Shmuel said, that this prusbul is like, right now, we're actually learning, a shame for Dayanim. And if I had the ability, he said, it's not, I'm going to be sure, it's like a chutzpah, because they're taking people's money away. If I had the koyach, avtulinu, I would have canceled it. Now, the Gemara is assuming that what he meant to say was that even though the reason might still apply, I would cancel it. You cannot cancel unless it's greater. So it must be that Hillel only made it for his generation. And therefore, you don't need this. When do we need Gadol Mimenu Chacham Minyan the Champur? It's going to place without any time limit. So then you want to override it. You need all these criteria. But since Shmuel says I would have canceled it, probably didn't. But I would have canceled it. How could you have canceled it? Must be because Hillel only made it for his generation. Says you want to know that here. This is what Shmuel say. Ima Yashachel. Fakert, he's lamenting the fact that Hillel made it forevermore, and I would love to be able to cancel, but I can't. I have a handicap because we're not Gadol Mimenu b'Chacham. We don't have the capacity. But really, he wanted to cancel it. Not just theoretical, but he wanted to cancel it. Ima Yashachel Yosim Hillel. If I would have been greater than Hillel, I would have canceled it. I don't like this whole idea of Pruzbul. Rab Nachman says, I disagree with Shmuel. I actually would support it. Now the question is, what do you support it for? If it's a takana is in place until somebody overrides it, you don't have to support it. It's there anyway. It's there anyway. I would add something. I would have gone one step further. That even if you did not, officially go to the Bezdin and do the Pruzbul thing, it's as if you gave it over to the Yamin. The Mefarshim, well, there's a lot of questions on the idea of Pruzbul. Why did Hill have to come up with the whole idea of Pruzbul? According to Rashi, that it only works with documented loans. Take all your documents and just go to Bezdin and give it to them. Forget the takana Pruzbul. If you physically give over your documents to Bezdin, you're giving them. You can. We learned you can sell your star chayvas. You can gift it to the Bezdin. And they'll get back to you afterwards, and that's it. Don't do Pruzbul because Bezdin definitely is allowed to collect. It says like you personally shouldn't know. Why come up with a whole new idea of Pruzbul? So obviously, even if you don't physically bring the stars to the Bezdin, that's the chiddush of Pruzbul. In other words, Pruzbul, then according to that, is not such a big innovation. All it is that this halacha, that if you gave it to Bezdin, they can collect. You don't have to physically give it to Bezdin. Just say Hareini Moshe Lechem, or my chayvus. If you hold that it also applies to oral, others try and bring a proof from here, not like Rashi, that even an oral loan, that's why you need a Pruzbul. You're right. As far as shtaras are concerned, you could have gone to Bezdin. So why did he have to come up with this whole new idea of Pruzbul? Is because what about an oral loan? There are no documents, and how do you get that over to Bezdin? The chiddush is that also included in Pruzbul. Taking it further, and there are a bunch of other questions. Ibaylu have a question. Hi, Uber. What kind of word is Uber? Is Lisha the chutzpah that is a chutzpah Bezdin? Take people money away, or at least the chusad. This is make life for Bezdin much easier. How? Toshma, I'm coming here. It makes life much easier because then you don't have to right before. Or what happened is, if it would have been Pruzbul 3 months before Shemitah, they'll be congested there, and all the butter didn't because everybody's trying to collect their loans, and obviously other people are trying to avoid paying it back and hiding and everything else. So they want the Bezdin to give them the right to go seize assets. So the last few months was terrible, and so much pressure on the dayanim. So this makes life easier because they can collect whatever the Pruzbul. Rula says aluba kala, and he used the word aluba. It's a shame on a kala. She's into beker chavas. The worst thing is about kala. Wild. They have gechuppah mezana. So it's an allegory. Where basically the Eden at Har Sinai, they're by the chuppah getting married to the Eibishter. They go and worship a golden calf. It's like a kala in the chuppah's mezana, and he used the word aluba, which means it's a shame or a chutzpah. Amar Amori said, Broda Bashmul, the son of the daughter Shmuel. Every time we have an Amori, we always call him by his mother's name because we had the Gemara there that they were kidnapped by Goyim, his mother, and they were very smart. And they said to the people, "You wait outside." They came into shul and said, "We were kidnapped, but we were tired." And one of the kidnappers actually ended up marrying her, and he was Megayah. So because she was so smart, a big time and everything else, and cleansed them, we say that she's tired. So we call her the son by the name of the mother to show that she was 100% tired. And that she's very smart. Others say because she was exactly the opposite. She conceived when the father was still not a Yid. He only came to the guy afterwards. So therefore goes after her name. Talking about it further, I don't know what about my crow. What's the post? There's a post that says as well. But while the king is parting away, is Nardi Nosanechai. He goes ahead and gives her all these beautiful perfumes, all these beautiful scents, because she's out there trying to flirt with other people. Or we're saying that Nardi Nosanechai, that all the perfumes gave up their beautiful scent because the color went in Mazana. Even while he's lamenting this, he still expresses love. The Chibit says, "No stand." Look, it became foul. It just says that lost. a lot of that fragrance. So we learned the love of people who are being embarrassed and humiliated, but they don't respond. They hear how people are poking fun of them, and they don't respond. They serve the Eibush out of love. And if they sends them Yisurin down their way, they don't complain. Regarding them, it's described. It says the oyav those who love Hashem is kitseis Hashem is b'gurosa. The sun comes out in his full strength. In other words, he has a munah and betachon Hashem. Everything comes from the Eibush. My approval. What's the origin of the word approval? It's like a Greek word, but what does it mean? Price. We are supporting bully. Bully are the poor, ubuti and the rich. Bully elu ashirim. Bully, these are the rich. The chsiv, it says the shavarti is going to I will break your pride, and is referring to this is the teicha. In other words, you think that you're strong and you're rich. I'm going to break you. So bully is what do you call it? We're talking about the rich people of Yehuda that they're going to be broken, and buti. Those are the poor. The chsiv, it says have a tamitem. You should lend them money. Exactly. So Mephoshim is telling you what's going on here. Where's buti coming in? And why bother explaining buti? So I guess maybe what he's trying to say is you think it's a Greek word. So if it would be Greek, it would have said prus buli buti. And because the Chachamim we don't just follow Greeks at random. We have our own thing. So we just say prus bul because it's our own. Otherwise, you would have said prus. You're supporting both. You're supporting the poor that they're going to continue getting loans in the 6th year because nobody will lend money to the poor because they'll not get paid back. And you're supporting the rich so they get the money back. But the Chachamim, or which is the main reason? You're helping both out, that the rich can get their money back and the poor should still get loans. What was our primary objective? To make sure that the poor continue getting loans, or make sure that the rich get their money back? See, he's saying, even though both are correct, but we only call it Prus Bull, because our main compassion was that the poor should continue getting loans. Rabbi said to somebody who speaks other languages, my Prus Bull, what do you think the word Prus Bull origin? Amalei, he says, Pursa the Milsum. That we made a takana that Purus means we made something to help people out. That's what the origin word principle. Okay, we stop 15 tomorrow, Mr. Shem.